Hello, this is the 5th webcast of the PBC Morning Dawn study group at Padma Samye Ling, and we'll be discussing today from Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche's book, The Buddhist Path, Chapter 5, which is called Training in Discipline, Concentration, and Wisdom. So then we'll just begin with opening prayers, and then we'll go into the discussion. Thanks. Samantabhadra, Vajrasattva, Pramadabhadra, Sri Singha, Padmakara, the 25 king and subjects, So, Zur, No, Yang, the 100 Tirtans and others, the lamas of the Kama and terminal lineages, to you I pray. The supreme tradition of the glorious Buddha Padma Samye, which is the essential, extraordinary view and doctrine of the early translation school, you keep alive and spread by the light of wisdom. Lord of Dharma, great Khenpo, I pray at your lotus feet. In the palace of the Ogman Dharmadhatu, the essence of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, the one who shows clearly the Dharmakaya of my own mind, we pray to the Honorable Root Guru. Glorious Root Teacher, precious one, dwelling on the lotus seat on the crown of my head, hold me with your great kindness, and bestow the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind. Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi. So this chapter 5 is divided into 3 points, and the first is discipline, and the second concentration, and then the third wisdom. And so quickly I'll go over the Rinpoche's, like the overview of the chapter where they discuss the discipline. So they begin by saying that the nature of the mind is filled with limitless goodness qualities, but to fully reveal the Buddha, these qualities, the Buddha taught the 3 trainings of discipline, concentration, and wisdom. And discipline is not like following orders. We're fully relating with our mind by taming the negative, limited habits of our body, speech, and mind. And this is the first step in revealing the mind's goodness qualities. And then the best support for discipline is mindfulness, alertness, and conscientiousness. In our daily life as well as in our practice, we have to pay attention to what is happening if we expect to develop good results. So then we'll just read this first topic.
According to the Buddhist teachings, discipline is not like following orders or being forced to do something. Discipline means to relate fully with your own mind. In order to uncover our true nature, we need to discipline our body, we need to discipline our speech, and we need to discipline our mind. Discipline is the first stage of cleaning up and preparing for further developments. It is like clearing the ground. If we want to erect a beautiful building, we need to clear the surface first. That's page 27, second paragraph.
I had a question about discipline, particularly if you so that was the second paragraph on the page, and if you look down at the third paragraph on 27, there's one line in particular: discipline should be accompanied by mindfulness, careful attention, and joyful effort. And I think it was either in that paragraph or somewhere else in this chapter there, Rinpoche has talked about how mindfulness is, or not mindfulness, but discipline is relating fully with the mind. And one thing that occurred to me that is, so what's the way that discipline influences mindfulness? Because I think so often, particularly in a lot of books that are geared towards people who are very new, a lot of emphasis is put on mindfulness and the mindfulness practices. So what is it that the discipline brings to the mindfulness that isn't already there within mindfulness practices? maybe what's a way that it highlights it more is maybe more of the question there. It's kind of a practical question, I guess.
I think, I mean, maybe it has to do with a little bit with how discipline, you know, how it's on this terms sheet, it can be kind of talked about in terms of ethical conduct. So as Shila, which is one definition of discipline as it's used in these three trainings. So kind of like, not only just mindfulness in general, but also really looking more at like our outer behavior and like kind of like how are we interacting with others and you know kind of our, both. And so in terms of our body, speech, and our mind, kind of being disciplined about our conduct.
So is it kind of in the way of saying it's rather than being mindful of robbing a bank, we're mindful of washing the dishes. Are you kind of in that way, are you saying? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also, if you don't have a virtuous conduct, your mind becomes agitated, and therefore it's much harder to practice mindfulness. You know, say somebody who's like a bank robber, or somebody, they have a lot of worries and fears. So just if your ethical conduct isn't in line, then you actually have a much more difficult time, or you couldn't practice mindfulness.
Exactly, because our mind is so much influenced by our body and our speech. Then if what we do with our body and our speech is really rough or based on these negative emotions, then it's going to increase our habit of our mind to be tight, have more grasping, have these same negative emotions, be stronger. And then what mindfulness is doing is highlighting in the present moment, like, well, what is my mind doing? Is it negative, balanced, or is it imbalanced or balanced? And that if, I mean, I think the big part of mindfulness is that we see what our mind is doing in the present, and at the same time we see if that's tending to lead us towards more suffering, and we experience that suffering in not a pleasant way. And then also mindfulness would see if it's tending to make our mind more balanced, and then we kind of experience how that is more free from suffering or more relaxed, more attentive to the details, more available to be interacting with what's actually happening in a situation, different things.
So you're saying mindfulness would lend itself easily to discipline then? Yes.
And it seems to me that it's also, it's a way of helping to define what is discipline. Definitely it seems mindfulness is a part to be remembering our intention, remembering, kind of looking at our motivation, our general goals, what's most appropriate with what's actually right with us now, and always just keeping that atmosphere and that awareness of our intention, whether it's actions of our body, actions of our speech, or just where our mind, our self is. I mean, it seems like there's a lot that makes up discipline, and that's part of our discussion here, is like, well, what is discipline? And definitely it seems it entails mindfulness. And then of course mindfulness and alertness and conscientiousness kind of seems like applies to our concentration as well, but it definitely has a place with kind of watching our body, speech and mind. Remembering our overall goal and objectives and instructions and promises and so many. Go ahead.
Yeah, like Jongon Control, the first Control, he wrote this giant, vast treasury of knowledge, they call it, which includes one of the whole scopes of the Buddhist teaching. And the first one, which was the root of the whole and the foundation and the backbone for everything that came afterwards, and that was his intention to write, was a commentary on basically discipline, the three vows. And as like they say, without discipline, you can't really progress at all, because you have, like Lai was saying, like everyone else was saying, normally like I think discipline is like, I think it's helpful to think of in some ways as like, well, where do we want to go? Like, what direction do we want to go in? If we want to go in like bank robber direction, then we shouldn't be disciplined in certain ways. We should just do that. We should do bank robber activities. If we want to go in the direction of like being more gentle, less agitated, less drama, like more gratefulness, more awareness of like impermanence and the fleeting aspect of everything. And also I think it's tied into just recognizing our present circumstances and how lucky we are and how special those circumstances are. Because as they say, like the Buddha said, the thought of impermanence is like a whip to the horse. And that has to do with discipline in the sense that here in Ceaseless Echoes, they talk about discipline that rejects negative action, but also discipline that accepts positive action. So it's not just like, I'm not going to do this. Here's a big list of things I can't do or shouldn't do or won't do. Because that way you could be really encumbered, But if you think of it as like, well, here's where I want to go. I want to go down the Dharma path. I want to, realize these states. And then what helps me with that? And maintaining a calm mind, calm body, calm speech, calm mind, cultivating mindfulness, all those things together.
And maybe going off of that as well, there's another term that Rinpoches were tying into this. Again, in that same paragraph I was referencing before, that third paragraph, they talk about not only the careful attention, which I think we've talked about here, but also the joyful effort, which I think for a lot of people, including myself, the link between joyful effort and discipline isn't always very apparent, particularly at first. So I was wondering if people would talk a little bit about the connection of how to bring joyful effort into discipline and mindfulness, or how it might even just naturally be within that discipline.
Well, I was just thinking about how, in that same paragraph, again, this third paragraph, just talking about discipline as good planning, and it's really just like what you were saying. Like, if you think about it, like, what do you do when you're going to plan an activity? Like, thinking about, like, what you're going to need along the way. So what's your destination? And, if you have that pretty clearly in mind, and it's, in this case, it's like following the Dharma, then it's like, what do you put in your basket? And you joyfully pack these, like, good, useful things, like mindfulness, like, whatever the ingredients I need. There's so many good ingredients, positive ingredients, and so it's, in a way, to me, that's sort of how it seems like joyful effort is part of discipline. It's just like planning for a trip, and you're excited, and it's good, the destination's good, and put everything useful in that basket.
So you're talking about a level of appreciation, or more?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, and it's just like maybe the joyfulness of maintaining the awareness of the destination, in a sense. And so because the discipline is to help us go there, And so in that sense, it seems like joyful effort. So it's only going to help us get there more quickly and with greater ease. So maybe others have something to say about that, but.
Just too, how basically, the three with discipline is, like Andrew mentioned too, is how we're really looking at the law of cause and effect, and cause, conditions, results of suffering and its causes, of cessation and natural liberation, and the path to realizing that is the path, and part of that is seeing, well, with our body, speech, and mind, how our activities of body, speech, and mind, related to our suffering, and how can we start to erode and wear down suffering for ourselves, as well as the suffering we can create in inauspicious conditions for ourselves and other beings in our connections. And when we really can see to some degree our mistakes and recognize them, and really see their results to whatever degree we can, I think we naturally don't enjoy seeing that at all. And then likewise, the more we see our virtuous qualities and the virtuous qualities of others, and virtuous activities of body, speech, and mind, where there's less ignorance, where there's less aversion and anger and there's less, attachment and jealousy and doubt and hesitation, just all these, especially if we look at the three main poisons, anger, attachment, ignorance, and then how they relate. So just two, the causes too for realizing more, beneficial and positive and healing, nurturing, balancing activities we can do with our body, and that are not only for ourselves but others, through all the paramitas and so many levels and things. And then likewise with our speech, to have meaningful, kind, uplifting speech is, again, we kind of naturally can reflect on that and see, to some degree, see how that's nice, and then likewise the more kind of, to whatever degree we can see more clearly and think more clearly and have an open mind and heart, then that too. So I think the way joyful effort reflects too, and we can really have some degree of seeing, this is going to, I can see how this is nice and natural and more balancing, and I want to engage with this more, and then likewise, this isn't good. This doesn't taste good. This, I'm not happy, others aren't happy, it's causing such a mess, so just that balance of being more aware of body, speech, and mind, lessening that, negative activities and states of mind, as well as then positive things. Just the way joyful effort reflects to that, when we can really see and engage that way. How discipline, again, Rinpoche's talk here, it's not about an outer, police force or getting too tight, but really what's bringing more balance to our body, speech, and mind, and what's not only for ourselves, but other people and the environment and the world.
I have just a quick question. I don't know how much time you have on this topic, but just, do you all think that discipline could be also, you could talk about it in terms of renunciation? Or is that maybe only a piece of it? I was just thinking with this definition from the Ceaseless Echoes about being, rejecting negativity, but then also accepting positive actions, and then the third, benefiting beings. In some ways, I feel like, from what I understand of renunciation, that is all of those three things. Maybe highlighting the rejecting negative, but how do you think renunciation fits in?
I think particularly a lot of what Laya was just saying, it kept sparking in my mind back to the four thoughts that turn the mind. A lot of that reflecting on not only the present circumstances, but also what brought about those present circumstances, and what was in those causes that created the peaceful or the joyful pieces of what's in our current circumstances, but also at that same time, what created the disharmonious and the suffering kind of qualities of what's in the present moment. So I think, I agree, there's definitely a very close relation, and particularly what Laya was talking about, that having that reflection on that really creates a lot of that joyful effort.
We're renouncing the causes of our suffering and the causes of other people's suffering, and then we're accepting the causes of our happiness and other people's happiness. So definitely in that way, as renunciation, it totally leads us to the path of Dharma, that good activities lead to positive states of mind, that in a larger sense, it reveals the natural goodness qualities that are in our mind. So it's connecting more directly with how our mind is when it's balanced, or our primordial wisdom. And then definitely in the context of joyful effort, I thought to mention, in addition to what Laya was saying, that more in the Mahayana context of seeing joyful effort and discipline as the paramitas, as the second paramita and the fourth paramita, that joy that joy largely comes from really being more and more and more concerned about other beings. I think really that larger context, like Shantideva is famous for saying that all suffering comes from desiring one's own happiness, and all happiness comes from desiring the happiness of others. that it's that ego clinging when it's only about us and our little box of concerns that really causes that it really like squeezes out the joy that we can experience. It's really being really more concerned, more pervasively concerned about ourselves and others in this larger view, in a longer term view, that like that joy is really there. I think is
I have a question that not to any particular one of these topics, but in general with the whole, because when you're talking about the Mahayana aspect of these, I was curious, what framework do you believe that Rinpoches were discussing these points in? Because they didn't use a lot of vocabulary that would designate which particular yana it was a part of. And then I think particularly as we brought into the concepts and terms that we're talking about, we're particularly looking at the Noble Eightfold Path. So do you find it's useful to bring in that Mahayana aspect when we're discussing these? I mean, of course you do, because you just said it. But like how else could we look at these different points in the Mahayana view to bring out some more of the meaning?
It's both. I mean, I know during this past month-long retreat, when Khenpo Rinpoche was talking about union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, he says in the Mahayana context they don't talk so much about the Noble Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
Because they do talk a lot about the three trainings. The training of morality, concentration, wisdom, which are the essence of the Noble Eightfold Path.
Right.
So that they're really the same, because like seeing the 6 paramitas as being these 3 trainings, it actually includes all of the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay. In a larger view of being concerned about all beings everywhere, like it is in a larger context. So talking about the 3 trainings is both the so-called Hinayana and Mahayana discussion. I mean, it's essential to as the Noble Eightfold Path, it's the 4th Noble Truth, which is like core teaching of Buddha in the first turning, or in that Hinayana teachings. And then as 6 paramitas, like the 3 trainings can be said to be the 6 paramitas. And wisdom is encompassing all 6 paramitas.
Yeah, I was actually, while you were explaining that, I was thinking about that as well, because I mean, you could even relate them directly if you wanted to, just particular paramitas, and but that it is really kind of fascinating how they really do line up. If you look at them side by side, and it's very easy to see, oh yeah, this is, it's just a different way of explaining this really beautiful teaching.
And they talk about primordial wisdom in the chapter in several parts. And primordial wisdom is generally Vajrayana view, or the Ati Dzogchen view.
Okay.
Too, of just, it's primordial. It's not actually, samsara isn't the actual nature. The nature is wisdom from the beginning. So it's a higher teaching.
I thought maybe it's good, just with timing, to go on to this next point of concentration more specifically. And here in the chapter, Rinpoches, first they say discipline of body, speech, and mind is the basis, and then next comes concentration, which means it deals more directly with the mind. That discursive dualistic mind is always running around, running wild. We only have to look to our own minds to see this, and that mind always comes before the activities of our body and speech. And so in order to develop concentration, we have to be our own teacher. And of course we receive teachings and instructions on how to tame our body, speech, and mind. But we're the only ones who actually can apply these instructions in our lives. And that developing good concentration takes time. We have to continually be mindful and apply the instructions properly with joyful effort. But the more we practice properly with joyful effort, the more we will reveal the hidden natural goodness qualities of our minds. And that there are 3 experiences that can arise when we practice concentration techniques. And they are bliss, clarity, and non-thought. Rinpoche say bliss is healthy, and it reveals our inner qualities that as they pervade our mind and our entire body regardless of the external circumstances. And clarity is more the experience of when the mind is very clear and bright, and we feel very light, and oftentimes many kind of insights arise. And that 3rd experience of non-thought is when we remain undistracted by our thoughts, that if thoughts do arise, they don't disturb us, that we can intentionally remain in meditation without being distracted by thoughts for longer and longer periods of time. And while these three experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-thought are natural results of concentration, it's very, very important not to be attached to them and just to continue practicing according to the instructions. And so that in this chapter is principally on this topic of concentration. Does someone else want to read this second point here?
To discipline your mind and have concentration, you need to become your own teacher. A skillful teacher can give guidelines and instructions to assist you, but real discipline and concentration must come from yourself. External supports or forces cannot subdue your mind and bring good concentration. To develop discipline and concentration requires continual practice with joyous effort. Page 28.
Well, I have a question that had to do with the bliss, clarity, and non-thought. Are they related to the three kayas?
I think they're said to be transformations of the three poisons. And I think they're related to the three kayas too. They're talked about that way. So non-thought is more related to transforming ignorance. Bliss is the transformation of attachment. And clarity is the transformation of anger. And they really specifically say these are really natural qualities. They arise naturally. And even in the nature of the mind, like has these qualities naturally, but it's the grasping that's the problem. So when we grasp to these qualities, then they become the poisons. And when we don't grasp to these experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-thought, they become just the natural expressions of how our mind and body are when they're balanced. And so you could say more, I mean, I think it's related that non-thought is more related to the formless aspect of our mind. So that's more Dharmakaya. And then I think the bliss is always more related with the Sambhogakaya, the bliss emptiness. And then the more arising, kind of outreaching qualities of mind or activities is more related with that clarity, the more distilled or crystallized expressions of mind, which is more related with that clarity.
Would that be Nirmanakaya?
Yeah, so Nirmanakaya.
So how about concentration itself? I mean, how could we wrap up? What is concentration? Or how do we concentrate? Like within Buddhist terms on the Buddhist path. Go ahead.
Well, I like this sentence on page 27. It was just right as Rinpoche started talking about concentration. Page 27, this fourth paragraph, saying that until we develop good concentration, we will remain on the surface of the mind without discovering its deeper wisdom. And I really like that sentence because it's kind of like, it shows how these three trainings relate to each other, that discipline is really where we start. We prepare the ground, we just determine our destination, and then concentration is really where we begin to really move inward. I mean, it's really where we stop and start to really look inward at the mind. And then it progresses inward, and we'll talk about wisdom more in a minute, but that's just like the deepest, so kind of like starting out here in a more outer way with our discipline and conduct, and concentration is where we really start. We settle our minds. And there's a lot of different types of concentration practices, but it's really like just how we can begin moving inward.
And say here that discipline, like just related with what you said, discipline is much more related with body and speech. And then concentration is related with mind, but what part of mind? The discursive, dualistic, conceptualizing part of mind. So lessening that, taming that. And that wisdom, the third, is more related to the non-conceptual wisdom aspect of our mind, or the primordial wisdom of our mind. So it is that progression of deepening from the more outer, apparent level to the more inner, all-pervasive, natural way of how the mind is. And Khenpo Rinpoche specifically was talking about that in the mountain retreat instructions of His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche 2 years ago. Those instructions.
I was going to say, so basically could we say, I mean, if we look at like meditation, it seems like that's kind of definitely something involved with concentration. Of course we need to concentrate to do any activity, but especially if we're working with our mind, concentration. So then, I mean, again, just kind of remembering, Rinpoche's talk more and later in the book, but just how that relates to like shamatha, meditation and vipassana, or how that, especially shamatha, seems, or calm abiding meditation results, is an embodiment or a method of actually applying concentration. But I just thought.
So what types of shamatha are there? There's two types.
There's two types of shamatha. There's with an object and without an object.
So what's with the object? What's the example?
So with an object would be if you have a beautiful image of the Buddha and you're going to focus right on the Buddha's third eye. That's just an example. Or anything, a beautiful flower or something that catches your eye, meaning the instructions, it's usually.
What's without object?
Without object could be visualizing.
Yeah,
when we're just imagining or visualizing, seeing something, seeing the third eye of the Buddha. And then there's also just completely formless, kind of just where the object is maybe awareness itself. Is that a simple way to say it?
We're holding something in mind, but it's very subtle, and it might not be an apparent object, but our mind is still holding an object.
I did have a question when it comes to concentration too. Why you started to talk about this, I was wondering if we could elaborate on it a little bit, particularly when we're talking about the shamatha and the vipassana. Particularly since the first is more of that just concentrating on what's there, and then the vipassana being that how you cut through it and seeing that it's not the way that you've habitually held it to be. Would vipassana then go more into the wisdom qualities that we're talking about in the third point coming up, or does that still fall more into concentration? Or is it that vipassana gives rise to the wisdom?
Vipassana is the wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a shamatha or a concentration is we're holding something in mind, either an outer object or we're holding on to an inner object, something that we're visualizing, or space, for example. But regardless, the mind is holding onto something. There's a sense of self, holding on to what is not self, an object. Then wisdom, or the vipassana, the supreme or extraordinary insight, or seeing, extraordinary seeing, is in that type of technique, the mind isn't holding anything. The mind is just releasing all holding, all grasping, and trying to naturally recognize and abide in how the mind is when it's not grasping onto anything. And they say when the mind is doing that, what it's doing is recognizing its primordial wisdom and sustaining that recognition. So that's vipassana, and so that's this third part of the wisdom training.
Or like supreme seeing, right? That's the translation, of vipassana.
And isn't it when you do some analysis, like you turn the mind, you say you look at the mind, or you ask what is it, or what color is it? Isn't that vipassana?
It can be. I think there's styles of vipassana. One's a more deductive or inferential style, where you can ask a analytic. It's like analytic meditation. You intentionally ask a conceptual question to lead to a non-conceptual recognition, or how your mind is when it's not holding on to any question. You ask a question to your mind, and the answer is not holding on to an answer. I mean, vipassana like that. But then just to directly look, without kind of trying to conceptualize it, then that's like more of a direct technique for vipassana.
Do these three trainings necessarily build on each other? Like, do you see that you need to have a foundation of discipline before you can really begin to have concentration? You really need to have that foundation of discipline and concentration before you have that practice of wisdom? Or is it that they grow all together?
I think it's both. I mean, it's both. But the foundation is discipline and ethical conduct. Without that, you don't have anything at all. You have your normal, ordinary, wild, outrageous habit patterns. That's what you have, So to think that you would really have concentration, or some kind of stabilized way. I mean, it's a dynamic thing. Like say the three vows, the outer vows are say the Vinaya, and then the Bodhisattva vows, and then the Tantric Samayas, or the Tantric vows, and how one is related more with conduct on the outer level, the other one is related more with maintaining compassion for all beings and cultivating that and not doing others wrong, or yourself. And then the Vajrayana is really related with wisdom, maintaining pure perception, maintaining the view, so it's like, they're all totally based on each other. Like maybe if this is the foundation and this envelops concentration, which envelops wisdom, but they're all just like, I think as your concentration gets better, your discipline gets better, your wisdom gets better. As your wisdom gets better, your discipline gets better, your concentration gets better.
But at the same time, so you're essentially also saying that one can't skip the discipline and just go straight to, oh, I'm wise, I'm practicing wisdom without, taking that time to relate to the mind in a way that's disciplined.
Yeah. This is something that comes up a lot in the Vajrayana.
There's also that aspect of, should we go to wisdom? Because I think we only have like 5 minutes or something, but...
Yep. But I mean, if
we get there,
That's good,
sure,
So I'll just do a quick version. So it says in the chapter, which is based on discipline and concentration, we develop wisdom. Wisdom is fresh, complete, and free of all grasping and confusion. It's the direct experience of the primordial nature of the mind. All sentient beings and Buddhas share the same nature of mind, this primordial wisdom or Buddha nature. It's always there, but is only temporarily covered up by our negative habits, obscurations, and grasping. And though we already have this primordial wisdom nature of our mind, we have to reveal it by removing our grasping. So on the path, the most important thing is to work directly with our mind. And then the best way to work with our mind is with these 3 trainings of discipline, concentration, and wisdom. So now if we highlight this wisdom, maybe we talk about wisdom instead of reading this topic. So that third topic point is on page 32nd and 4th full paragraphs. But maybe we'll go directly into wisdom. So what is the wisdom?
But I think we could look at wisdom. There's conceptual, right? There's actually even just hearing the teachings is bringing us wisdom. And then there's when we are studying and discussing and contemplating, thinking about the teachings, that's another aspect of absorbing the wisdom even a little more. And then there's the non-conceptual wisdom, or what we're really unveiling through our hearing and studying and contemplating and practicing, which brings out these more kind of the real, primordial wisdom. And so I thought kind of those basic frames as far as how we could relate to wisdom in that.
So it's called the 3 wisdoms. Wisdom of study, wisdom of contemplation, and the wisdom of meditation.
It seems here particularly, at least when I'm looking through the writing of Rinpoche's, it seems like they're referencing primordial wisdom here as well, particularly like when I'm looking at the definitions of wisdom is, not, or at least the way they talk about it here, wisdom is not something we can obtain from outside ourselves, it has been with us from beginningless time. So I think here it definitely seems like they're talking about the primordial wisdom. And then I guess a question from that then, so when we're talking about these 3 trainings of discipline, concentration, and wisdom, and the way that Khenpo seem to be particularly discussing primordial wisdom, do the other pieces of wisdom fit in with these 3 trainings then? Or how is it that they would fit into the concentration and the discipline? Particularly when we're talking about the wisdom of study or the wisdom of contemplation.
My understanding is that is wisdom. That's part of what we're doing here. When we're listening to the teachings and thinking about them a little bit and seeing how they relate to and absorbing them, that's an aspect of wisdom. And then when we move deeper actually applying and absorbing, so that we're revealing, that aspect of revealing our Buddha nature, our innate wisdom, primordial wisdom is there. So it's I could be wrong, but my understanding is that those three wisdoms can really fall underneath this. And of course that relates to the teachings involve all these other things, but maybe especially like the abhidharma, or like the pure potential, is also maybe that aspect of the teachings themselves. But even if we look on the levels of the Four Noble Truths or something, we could see there's wisdom there. And then how do we apply them? So they work together for sure, it seems. Creating causes and conditions for accumulating our merit, and kind of positive environments and positive conditions for revealing and unveiling, purifying our obscurations, and revealing and ripening our primordial wisdom. And they're definitely directly related with each other. Is that?
It's a complicated answer.
Yeah, it's a...
They say with Buddhist teachings there's two lineages: lineage of study, lineage of practice. So lineage of study is essentially Tripitaka, Vinaya, Sutra, Abhidharma. Lineage of practice is the three trainings: discipline, concentration, and meditation, or wisdom. So in order to do anything, whether we study or practice, we have to receive some kind of a teaching to actually start to investigate it. So all these Tripitaka ways of intellectually, conceptually investigating, receiving instructions and teachings, and then starting to contemplate them, really think about them, see if it's true or not, and our own experience testing them out, then that is the wisdom component of practice, having our conceptual mind engage with it, so that then when we apply it with a discipline, and then we apply it better, more directly to our mind, based on that foundation of tamed body and speech, then we go directly to our mind, working with these rough negative emotions and habits. Then what are we applying? The instructions that we receive through our study, and then that we're trying to contemplate intellectually with our contemplation. But then when really applying them in practice, then it really has to do with these three trainings. And then the most direct way of applying them is that third wisdom, the wisdom that's non-conceptual, beyond all grasping, or the wisdom of meditation, where we directly apply that in our practice. Which then, as Andrew said, then reinforms all of the other things we do. If we can recognize primordial wisdom, then do that as we're engaging with our body and speech, or as we're holding an object in mind, or as we're studying, then everything becomes a meditation. So from that side, then it kind of, from that third wisdom, which is that's where we're trying to go to. Everything in Buddhist teaching is oriented towards a view of non-grasping wisdom awareness of primordial nature. It all leads there. Then once that we arrive there, then the whole thing is to actually refine that, have that come out more and more, like have our body and speech and mind more and more always be in that state of balanced awareness, and without any error, any grasping.
Just one tiny little thing I wanted to say, just in that same vein. It's just so beautiful, this line on the very second to last paragraph. Very simple, but so profound, just this line that the primordial, page 30. Although ignorance and obscurations cover our wisdom, the primordial nature is always radiating. So really, just even that, the primordial nature is always radiating. Always. So it's like, that's the wisdom component, like right there, that it's like you all were saying, like it's all these teachings are leading to whatever helps us be able to see that these qualities are always there. So I mean, that seems to me why, like what you said, Laya, like it doesn't really matter which teaching it is that you're connecting to on a certain level, because that it's always there. So whatever kind of like ushers that kind of to see that or connect to that.
And I thought there were two quick points. All of this requires joyful effort, again, whether it's study or practice, whether it's any of the three trainings, we have to keep engaging it, that otherwise we won't achieve our result. They said that, Rinpoche said that very many times in this chapter, and we see that in our experience. We keep having to re-engage it joyfully as much as we can, with a view of all beings in mind. And then secondly, I think this second wisdom of contemplation is so critical, and oftentimes we can skip it. We just can receive a lot of teachings, we don't really investigate them, we don't really review the notes, we don't really try to put it into practice so much. And then 10 years later, we wonder why more change didn't happen. That contemplating, that really personally engaging the teachings, thinking about it, applying it, coming after we practice it, then reviewing it again. That's really key, that contemplation wisdom is so key with having our study be effective and having our practice be productive. Just about to mention that.
And on that point, I know we're out of time, but I had wisdom. We shouldn't think that it's just like some far off thing that's like very technical and very like far down the path. Anytime we realize something about our mind or our habit patterns or our conduct, and we learn something true. Anytime that we realize something true closer to the way things are that leads us towards our destination, that is wisdom. I mean, it's a smaller wisdom maybe than like big something else, but it's important to...
And how that relates to like what Drapa was saying with conceptual accuracy, or like what's working. And then of course there's the non-dual, non-conceptual, ever-present wisdom we're trying to unveil through connecting with that, with our analytic and accurate perception and conception. And of course there's so much more to say, and we can stop talking now and everyone else can enjoy their study time together. So we'll dedicate the merit briefly.
Swasti vidzayantu, chosum sasum chitu permaju, yingye sode tuje tujinji, kinchin balin shirao jubeku, nujo dendro zizanta chinsho. Om swasti, chuku nanta nunku chenresi, chuku bajun yapyun tuchetu, pela basan jachu yonsiga, dendro bende dundur nyushasho, gandhi rawe kowe jinkamsu, bendan bewa malu juwene, chenresi wan denzin japsoyi, jabe gaje badu denjo jing. Om swasti, Sirwang rinzin beme jinlajin, dunir bela san nordena, shedrum golo sunji pajote, samjen nandan jode namjal sho. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara may I free all beings.